Thank you for joining Jackson Lewis as we take a closer look at the employment law trends and tactics sure to shape 2023. This installment is one of 12 concise, field-specific podcast episodes that are part of our annual forecasting favorite, The Year Ahead. We invite you and others at your organization to experience the report's legislative, regulatory, and litigation insights in full at our website, jacksonlewis.com, or listen to the podcast series at whichever platform you turn to for compelling content.
Hello, everyone. My name is Michael Thomas. I am in Jackson Lewis's Orange County office, and I'm here with Michael Griffin from our Seattle office, and we are talking about the importance of health and wellness and how that's become even increasingly more important over the course of the past couple of years. So before we jump into this, Mike, do you want to say some introductory remarks?
Thanks, Michael. I appreciate that. Yeah, I'm a principal at Jackson Lewis, been with the firm a long time and really passionate about this topic. And I know Michael is as well. And we're just thrilled to be here and grateful for the opportunity.
I guess I'll start off really just talking a little bit about how the workplace has changed over the course of the past couple of years and really how those changes have kind of impacted the way that we view health and wellness. So we've had the pandemic, and some would even say that the pandemic is still ongoing. But what that ultimately means is that within a short period of time, really overnight, thousands of people became socially isolated, experienced dramatic change, rapid loss of loved ones, and their daily routines, your structures, and your habits were really removed with any kind of preparation to get ready for a change of that magnitude. We've also had political turmoil, and in some ways, more conversations about racial disparities. We also have a war, that we're all dealing with. So you have all these factors of stress, fear, and anxiety, and really uncertainty that we're all dealing with on a daily basis and in different ways. Something else that I think is kind of important over the course of the past couple of years is you've had these conversations about belonging and diversity, equity, inclusion. And in many ways, that can create extra stress and anxiety for diverse employees who may often feel that extra pressure to overperform because they have to overcome kind of a negative bias. Or they might feel that extra pressure to be perfect because people of color are not always given second chances. So diverse employees are now returning to the workplace, and many employers have made these commitments about belonging and inclusion, and they're asking these questions of, has the workplace really changed to the point it is more inclusive and diverse employees feel like they actually do belong. And so a lot has occurred over the past couple of years. I think the last thing that I'll note is, as much as we want to understand the increased stress and anxiety, you also have to appreciate our resiliency and our ability to pivot within a short period of time.
Yeah, Michael, and I agree with all your points. And I would say that just based on my observation about how the workplace has changed in this context of sort of well-being and wellness, I guess I would sum it up with a word, openness. That people seem to be more open to discussing how they're doing, even if how they're doing is not well. It's human nature for us to say, "Hey, how you doing? I'm doing fine." Is to say something very surface level. What I've observed, a lot of clients reaching out to us and asking questions about, is it okay to have conversations with folks when it leads to things like, my mental health is not great, or I'm struggling. And so I've noticed an increase in that in the past couple of years. In view of that, Michael, I mean, what new questions have you seen arising sort of from employers maybe struggling with or maybe not really aware of previously the need to focus on health and well-being?
I kind of put, like new questions in these two buckets. One, it's questions that employees are raising to their employers, right? And then it's questions from the employers in response to those questions from employees. And so what do I really mean by that? The big picture of what employees are experiencing and asking questions about is this concept of what does it really mean to actually see yourself, right? And it's this concept of self-awareness. And so self-awareness is really this form of stepping back and observing your thoughts and feelings as they unfold. And it can be as simple as just noticing the emotions that you feel when you're spending time with certain people, engaged in different activities, and how that impacts you. Or it can be even some way self-awareness can be more complex and layered with different thoughts that you might have about yourself or even about the workplace. And so simply self-awareness is the ability to kind of shine that light on parts of your internal world that might otherwise either get buried or pushed aside or go unnoticed. And I think as employees shine that light on their self, they learn new things about their self. They learn new things about their needs and then possibly what their expectations are from their employer to create that environment that feels safe, that feels healthy, where they can actually thrive. And that's really where a lot of employers want employees to go, is to that space where they can effectively communicate what are my needs to actually be able to perform at a peak level for the employer. And so you get a series of questions that come from that. The other set of questions that you're getting that are new is, as the employer hears all these questions, they're like, I'm not a therapist. How do I handle all these concerns of health and wellness that employees are bringing to me? And in some ways, like there's simple things that you can do, and then there's the big things that you can do. And we often talk about the big things that employers can do, like bring in a health and wellness director. Mm-hmm. But really, it's the small things that become more important, because that's what employees experience on a daily basis, are the small things. And that's things like just reducing the stigma around discussing employee mental health conditions, creating an environment where employees can actually acknowledge that they are either suffering from some kind of mental health issue or just struggling with something, and they want to ask for help. Like, can you just acknowledge that that's okay? And then it's effectively communicating your benefits. Like, do you have a clear document or place on your website that has an explanation for all the benefits that employees can access or resources to engage in that form of self-care? And then obviously it's accommodations, right? So, what are accommodations that you as an employer can provide when employees bring these mental health conditions, to your attention? And so those are the typical questions that I would say that you're hearing more that are a little bit new. It's employees themselves kind of shining that light. What are my needs? And then employers hearing it and having to make those critical and often challenging decisions. How do we accommodate those new needs?
That terrific input. I mean, I guess the only thing I would add to that is, in terms of sort of what new questions are arising, is in recent years, it seems like more employees are asking more openly, what are we doing? What is the company, what is the organization doing to care for folks who are struggling? In other words, to your point, do we have a wellness director? Are we in the process of even, considering whether to hire one? Those kind of questions I see more and more in terms of, employees wanting to know from leadership, because if leadership is not demonstrating the commitment to health and well-being for all workers, then workers aren't going to feel supported. They're not going to feel that the commitment is real or genuine. Yeah. At least that's been my experience so far. And it just seems like there's more and more discussion about this openly in the workplace and in the popular media as well, that covers workplace issues.
Yeah. And Mike, we're lawyers, so we do feel obligated to speak about compliance issues. So are there any compliance issues really that employers should keep in mind when we're talking about mental health in the workplace?
Oh, certainly. And some of the obvious ones, of course, relate to reasonable accommodation of disabilities in the workplace, whether or not someone raising an issue has raised an issue of a serious health condition that might entitle them to statutory leave under the FMLA or the state equivalent. So you have issues and potentially workers' comp issues if the situation the employee is experiencing happens to be work related. Of course, with mental health issues, that's a really difficult thing to show. It's more physical, at least in our state. very, very rare for a mental health issue to be attributable to workplace issues, but it's not impossible, not unheard of. And so, of course, all the normal compliance rules and issues would apply to a conversation about that. So even, like I said, even if the employee feels more open and more comfortable talking with a manager or even HR about their mental health struggles, it doesn't mean that because we have a more open environment now and this discussion is perhaps more welcomed and invited, that we still don't have to be careful. For example, we're not going to regard someone as disabled legally just because they come to us and tell us, I'm struggling with such and such an issue. So we have to be careful still. Those are the main ones I've seen, but have you seen any others, Michael?
So there's obviously the ones that you mentioned regarding whether mental health is covered by the American with Disabilities Act, or even with whether it's covered by the Family Medical Leave Act. But there's a couple other areas that I think sometimes come up is compensability of job-related mental illness injuries, of stress and anxiety. Maybe it's covered by workers' compensation. OSHA actually has some requirements about employers keeping records of related mental health concerns. And then there's obviously like your employee benefits, EAP type issues that could come up. But I think the thing that, at least for me, that I'm hearing from clients that becomes really important is that the ways that these issues are coming up is a little bit different. And so I think it's important to recognize that there are different ways that people have been affected by COVID that continues to impact people's well-being. So, in addition to the expected distress relating to illness, loneliness, grief, and other disruptions to your daily life, some specific newer work stressors are things like the isolation that comes from remote work, the anxiety of returning to the office, either full-time or part-time in a hybrid work environment, balancing work obligations, childcare, and just general family demands. So it becomes important to kind of recognize we have these concerns about workplace health, but in part based on kind of where we are, they're showing up in different ways that employers just kind of need to be a little bit more sensitive to. So.
Yeah, no, it's fabulous points. We have a few minutes left. And, I think we wanted to end on what might be some of the broader issues that employers are facing in this sort of new environment where health and well-being are more openly discussed at work. And do you have any thoughts on that, Michael?
Yeah, I mean, I think as lawyers, we want to talk about legal obligations or what you're required to do. But I think it's really important for employers to step back and ask, what do you want your work environment to look like if you want to create an environment where your employees feel healthy, they feel well, and they can actually show up and fully thrive within the workplace? If you're thinking about it from that space, what kind of work environment would you provide? What kind of wellness programs, EAP programs, what other perks and benefits might you provide your employees if you want their work environment to thrive? And so some of that takes a little bit of innovation going beyond just the legal obligations. Mike, what are your thoughts on that?
My only thought is it seems to me like that is the baseline, right? That the organization will thrive if its employees are happy and healthy. So if the happy and healthy employees feel like the organization is there to support them, the chances and the likelihood of them remaining for a long time with the organization, being more productive, feeling a sense of purpose and meaning in what they do day in and day out, you're going to achieve that. You're going to achieve that. And I say it's sort of a baseline or maybe the foundation is a better word for it. Because everything starts from there, and we know this from our personal experience. If we don't have our health, what do we have? If we're not healthy, everything else sort of takes a back seat, right? Yeah. So I think that applies in the workplace as well.
Yeah. And what are thoughts you might have on kind of what the future might look like in the workplace of, as employers start embracing wellness and concepts of health a little bit more?
It seems to me that there'll be a greater focus on this from the get-go, from the hiring of employees, from a retention standpoint, that well-being is sort of a given. Having a well-being plan, a well-being director or manager or a commitment to it is something that every organization will have to have in order to be an organization of choice. It'll be part of the recruiting process. Workers are more focused on this perhaps than some of us who have been working for a few decades. And so it seems to me, it's only going to increase the focus on this and the importance for recruiting and retention.
I think that's absolutely right. I think it's also a competitive advantage because when I think of the future of health and wellness, I think of health and wellness as intimately tied with empathy. It's also intimately tied with creativity and innovation, right? And so the better you feel about yourself, the more healthy and well that you feel, the more you actually are able to engage with other people and see the world through their lens, or at least make that effort to be able to do so, which is really empathy, right? And the better you feel about yourself, the more you can access your own personal creativity. And obviously creativity is directly linked to innovation. So really there's an aspect of, health and wellness that's great for the individual, but for the organization as a whole, to your point, Mike, it really can help the organization as a whole thrive and compete.
Agreed 100%. Well, thanks, Michael. This has been a really great conversation. It's always great to talk to you, my friend.
Likewise, man.
Look forward to seeing you soon.
Thank everyone for listening to this podcast and spending some time with us.
Yeah, very much appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us for the Year Ahead 2023 Special Edition podcast series. Please tune in to the next episode where we will continue to tell you not only what's legal, but what is effective. All of our Jackson Lewis podcasts are available to stream and subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Libsyn, Pandora, SoundCloud, Spotify, Stitcher, and YouTube. For more information on today's topic, our presenters, and other Jackson Lewis resources, visit jacksonlewis.com. As a reminder, this material is provided for informational purposes only. It is not intended to constitute legal advice, nor does it create a client-lawyer relationship between Jackson Lewis and any recipient.